Today, I'm going to talk to you about how I learned how to steal. It wasn't by starting out grabbing a few packs of gum off the rack at 7-Eleven. No, it was much easier than that. In fact, in a few minutes, you might want to try go stealing something yourself. Let's begin. That's me. Pretty dashing, eh? Yeah, well, this little guy who is circa 1993 is going to grow up to be a cold, hardened thief. Looks pretty threatening, right? No? Exactly. That's because the theft that I'm talking about is a different type of theft. One that happens millions, even billions of times per day. Your neighbor does it, your best friend does it, your professor might even do it in the middle of class. I know I had one that actually did it today. That's where the trap is. When you see the people that do it, you'd never guess it. Which brings me to my next point, which takes place about 16 years after this picture was taken. This is where I go to college. It's an overpriced bumper sticker school of about 12,000 students. Our mascot is orange, but most of the time everything around here is covered in white. See that girl right there at the foot of those steps? I'm not too positive, but I'd be willing to bet that on the day that this picture was taken, she stole something from Lady Gaga or Dave Matthews or Eminem or whoever she happened to be musically interested in at the moment. How do I know? Because the type of theft that I'm talking about is music piracy. And it's one of the most common types of theft in the world. It's crippling the music industry and bankrupting artists, and for the most part, we don't really care. Why? Well, let's take a few steps back before we go there. In 1999, a gentleman by the name of Sean Fanning, a college student at the time, unleashed one of the most revolutionary pieces of software of all time. The program, called Napster, gave anyone in its network a virtually limitless access to music. What was more important, though, was the fact that the music was free. Yep, that's right. The practice, which became known as peer-to-peer file sharing, skyrocketed from the time of Napster's inception, which marked the beginning of the downward spiral that the music industry is currently still stuck in. So why is it so terrible? Well, for one, if you're not paying anything for a song, chances are that nobody's getting paid for that song. Who's that somebody that's getting screwed when you pirate the music? Well, there's a few somebodies. The record label, publishers, producers, engineers, performing artists, but most importantly, the creator. The creator of a track is not getting reimbursed for his creation, which is pretty messed up. The result? More and more artists are having to stop creating because it's simply financially unrealistic. They have bills, sometimes a family, sometimes kids, and all those things require money, which songwriting is not helping them to get. Now, why haven't we taken to the streets in mobs and dragged those music pirates out of their homes and forced them to face the music, pun intended? Well, let's see how the typical transactional arc of theft goes for the music pirate. Let's just hypothetically assume that it's me doing the stealing. Hypothetically. Where do I have to start? Well, I have to want some music first, which isn't too difficult for most of us. The amount of music out there in the world right now is unfathomable. So you're operating in a pretty limitless sphere. Let's say that right now I want to download Led Zeppelin 4. That CD that's nice and colored in that rack. Great record. It was actually one of the few albums in my possession that I haven't stolen. But let's just pretend that I did. I want Led Zeppelin 4 because I'm an adolescent man. What the hell else am I supposed to listen to other than classic rock? Next, we go to the program. These programs connect all the computers on a given network and allow the user to search for a file amongst the virtually limitless pool of other computers in the network. So, for example, the odds that nobody on a program as large as, say, Napster, which boasted roughly 80 million users and 25 million tracks at its peak, the odds that nobody on that program had Led Zeppelin 4 was probably about the same as the odds of me getting Led Zeppelin to actually come into my living room and perform it. For me, during my early days of piracy, my go-to program was Kazaa, which you see it right now. Kazaa had a difficult name to spell, but had an extensive enough network that I was able to feed my middle school era music passions, which were more often than not stuff that sounded like Led Zeppelin 4. The next one that I used was LimeWire. LimeWire had the biggest network out of all the programs that I used, but also came with all the problems typically brought on by programs with big networks. Spyware, way too many results, disorganized or incomplete files, and files that were disguised as one thing, but more often than not turned out to be something very different, were all things that I had to deal with LimeWire. So, needless to say, that relationship didn't last too long. I was worried I'd always be doomed to dealing with LimeWire, but that was until I found SoulSeek. God damn, I loved SoulSeek. SoulSeek had a small network of all audio files that were outrageously complete and organized in their collections of music. And they had pretty much any type of music that you could ever want. The network was small, so the legal risks were minimal. Spyware and malware were nearly non-existent. And the feeling of being in a network of all audio files gave me this warm little feeling inside every time I would steal an album in my high school years. Problem with that practice, though, is that I didn't want to go to jail like this guy. You see, at colleges, it's much easier to find someone that's using peer-to-peer file sharing because the networks are much more accessible, and universities, such as my own, don't really like you using their bandwidth to steal stuff. I mean, they're gouging you for nearly $50,000 a year, but you can't use their stuff to steal a meager little 99-cent song. Makes plenty of sense, I know. So when I came to college, I had to revise my personal search engine. And that's when I turned to file hosting websites, my new best friend. File hosting websites allowed me to get the music that I wanted without the risk of running a peer-to-peer program on my computer, a program that my university can see and penalize me for. How do I use file hosting websites to my advantage? Well, I don't want to go into the explicit details of it because then you might be able to figure out whether or not I'm breaking the law, which wouldn't be too good for me. But I'll give you a little hint as long as you don't tell anyone. Got it? Good. Let's move on. What it comes down to in the end is this ethos of acceptable theft that my generation has established surrounding the practice. We know it's illegal, but it's small, so we don't feel bad about it. I mean, does Lady Gaga really need 99 more cents to buy another meat dress? Hell no. We want our music, we want it now, and most of all, we want it free. So what do? We alter our digital literacy to work for us. We revise our personal search engines. We learn what we must in order to get what we want. Sure, the record labels and the internet service providers and the universities will keep putting barriers in our way, but that's the catalyst that we need as a generation to develop something new. We identify the need, we create the solution. We alter our digital literacies to work for us in the digital spaces that we occupy in our daily lives. Is it moral? Well, that's a question for another day and maybe even another generation, because for now, we're going to keep doing it. Sure, some people might change, and one of those people might even be me. But for now, we all have iPods that need to be filled. We're going to keep increasing our literacy to keep our libraries growing. Not for the sake of our fellow man or for the sake of our generation, but we're going to keep doing it for the sake of our iPods.